Would you just look at it? Would you just look at it? Man, that thing's beautiful. I can't wait to get that thing in there. Hello guys, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to the garage. So as I was just saying, I can't wait to get this engine in the engine compartment, but we're not there yet. So that's kind of what I've been working on the last few nights. We had talked about before, there's a lot of little stuff that I have no idea how long it's going to take. I knocked some of that out already, which we'll start with that and then we'll kind of move into what we're doing tonight. So what I got done this week so far is I got our proportioning valve installed. This is a Summit Racing proportioning valve. So right here is the factory ABS controller or control module, whatever it's called. But since we're not running this ECM anymore, this CM2200, which we'll talk about that pile here in a minute. Since we're not running that, we don't need this big aluminum block that just doesn't do anything. Originally I was gonna make a bracket, see if we'd come back later. Decided against it and put a proportioning valve in. So as you can see, it's actually mounted to this bracket that has some supports for the power steering lines, which I also have started to install. I got the one going down to the steering gear, the other one that goes to the pump here. They're installed, but anyway, our proportioning valves in, like I said, Summit Racing. Had to reflare all 5 of these lines, the 2 feeding it, and then the 3 going down to our junction block, which feeds the rear, and then the right and the left wheels, right and left front wheels, that is. So got that all installed. Everything's looking pretty good. We were able to reuse our lines, which I'm very glad of. Now this bracket, I had to add a little tab. I welded a little tab on here and then drilled it, and then drilled through the original part of the bracket down here so we can mount that very nicely. Very happy with how that turned out. It looks pretty spiffy if I do say so myself. So anyhow, along with that, we got all of our brake lines installed. The one that comes in the engine compartment here is installed. The one that goes down there along the frame to the rear axle is installed. We got all the brake lines installed. Good to go there. Like I said, that's one of those things that kind of hopped up in front of us and we didn't know, we didn't even anticipate. So that being said, that kind of leads us into where we're beginning tonight. So I started kind of looking at all the engine stuff. We are waiting on some parts, but everything we need to do to the engine in order to get it installed into the engine compartment. Well, one of those things is to run our Breakout Tuning Solutions wiring harness, our standalone wiring harness, and mount our ECM on the engine. So this is a CM2100 ECM. This is what we're going to be using for the truck. This is the ECM out of an 07.5 to an 09.67 trucks. These are great ECMs. They're kind of they're the new standalone go-to because the 8, I think it's 49. The 5.9 ECMs are harder to come by. Anyhow, this is what we went with because this factory CM2200, yeah, it's not really good for anything other than a factory application. So making power with a 4th gen, at least a 2010 to a 2012, I don't know about 13 and up, is more difficult. So there's some limitations in the ECM, some stuff it's looking for and whatnot. So when you're going to the level we want to go to, trying to get like to 2000 horsepower, you kind of have to go to a full standalone with a different computer, and really going with a factory computer that is as functional as our 2100 is a much more affordable option than going with like a Bosch standalone. I don't even know what they cost and I don't want to know. So that's why we're switching ECMs. There's a great video on, I think it's Gray's Performance website. They also make standalone harnesses about how to do a CM2200 swap. I highly recommend it. It's very comical. It was great. So anyhow, mounting our ECM. Normally this ECM gets mounted right here like that. These two ECMs have the same mounting bolt pattern, the same bracket and everything. So normally that goes right here, which I'll show you on our old engine. Right here, as you can see, it's right below the factory CP3 pump. Here's actually the mounting holes for it, and the ECM sticks out to about here. So the problem that we ran into is with this dual CP3 timing cover and housing from D&J Precision, that beautiful piece of machinery right there. It moves, or it puts this second pump down here, whereas our old setup was up here with a pulley. So when you go to put your bracket in, now mind you, this is a cut down bracket. Normally it sticks out far enough that you have mounting points for the ECM. You put that in here and you can see there's little embossments in the block for the ECM bracket. You put that in there like so. Yeah, how do you get the ECM mounted to that? So that was the problem that we had, and here's the solution I came up with. The other problem with this is I decided to have the computer mounted to the side of the block, not knowing any better. I probably should have gone with a full standalone harness that would relocate this, you know, to in the cab or wherever I so chose. I went with this option because I just figured it'd be less wires to run through the firewall to all our different sensors and all that kind of nonsense. So anyhow, I came up with this solution right here. We'll mount this in a factory location with its rubber isolators and all that. I have two aluminum brackets that will put on like that, or like that, and like that. And there we have our two aluminum strips mounted. We have some countersunk bolts that are actually in there with some welded nuts on the back side here. I also have some welded nuts on the bottom for the ECM bolts there. And we take our CM2100, we can put that on here like so, and then mount it with our 3/8 hardware. Right there and right there. Now the only real problem with this setup is I gotta hold the nut on the back here so I can tighten it up. Hopefully it's not too much of a bear, but since I used aluminum, there's no real good way to attach a nut to that, but we'll give it a shot, see how this thing works. Then we'll pull it back out, and if everything's good, I'll clean that bracket up and paint it. And I'm also trying to do something with the ECM. I don't know that I should paint it. Please leave a comment down below if you know anything about it, if it's okay to paint these things or not. Obviously not the wire connections, but just the housing. I haven't decided yet, but the bracket itself, we're definitely going to give a nice coat of paint. So let's get this thing in and see if it works. So the ECM is in. The only little tricky thing here is this one fuel line. You got to put the bolt in the hole on the ECM before you put it in there. And we'll probably have to make a bracket or something to keep our lines going to our distribution block and to our CP3 pump off of the ECM. You know, keep them off there from rubbing. But other than that, I'm very happy with it. Yeah, it's certainly looking good. I'm thrilled with how that turned out. I mean, it definitely took some thought to try and figure out what I wanted to do, but yeah, I'm stoked with that. That is perfect. And then our Breakout Tuning Solutions harness will be able to mount in here like that, which I did kind of fit up the other night. Really like so. Yeah, so then our Breakout Tuning Solutions harness will go in here, and we'll actually have some room to tuck all our wires. We can get access to our nuts. Yeah, if you didn't know any better, you'd swear that was a factory installation. Yeah, so we're gonna get that thing off so we can paint it, and then move on to our next activity, which actually takes place in the cab of the truck here. So we got our Kirky racing seat installed, our 5-point harness. When I installed the seat, I actually put it as far back in the cage as possible to give me as much room for entry and egress. into the cage, which I'm actually very happy with so far, considering this thing's sitting up higher because it doesn't have the weight of the transmission and the engine and all in it. I can get in and out rather easily. That being said, moving the seat back that far, I cannot reach the gas pedal anymore. I can reach the brake pedal, but it's going to have to come back. But the gas pedal's easy with what we have going on here. It's just 2 bolts in there, and then there is your throttle pedal. So I needed to figure out a way to try and figure out where I wanted it, and I really couldn't figure out a good way to know if I liked it or not. So here's what I came up with. Here's a quick little bracket I made. Basically, I can bolt this bracket onto the one on our steering column, and I can bolt the other side to our pedal. So it is a piece of pipe with a nut welded on it and a piece of all thread connected to the other plate and a jam nut. So we can run this plate out and adjust our pedal length. If it needs to go right or left, or up or down, we'll find that out. But basically, we're going to take it from the stock location and just see how many inches towards the seat we need to go. So we'll get to installing this, kind of play around with that. That way we can make a more permanent bracket. I don't think this would suffice, that's for sure. So surprising enough, it only took one adjustment. Put it in, really didn't like it. I felt it needed to go back. Really only had about another inch of travel. And yeah, if I get firmly planted in the seat, yeah, that's perfect. Now we will have to adjust our brake pedal. We're gonna have to figure that out. It's a little different story. I think this might be cast of some sort, so I don't think we can weld it. I'm gonna have to look into that, but basically I'm trying to make it as comfortable as possible, almost as much like Caitlin as possible. So I went over and looked, and really the brake pedal in Caitlin sticks about 2 inches further, or 2 inches closer to the driver rather. So we'll have to figure something out there. I mean, I can hit the brakes, but I can't plant it to the floor. So we'll have to figure that out, and then hydraulically I might not ever be able to do that, I don't know. Anyhow, the only problem I see, our bracket is actually pretty sturdy. I was surprised about that. Like I said, completely out of adjustment. I ran it all the way in, and yeah, that was perfect. But when I hit the pedal, that thing is kind of dancing all over the place, and it's not even the bracket that I made. I guess it is a little bit down there, but the other bracket that is on the steering column, this aluminum piece here, that is all moving too, because that actually is another bolted section to the steering column. So what I think I'm going to do is come up with a better bracket for the pedal and just come straight off that other bracket, and then we'll probably just do something up here where we drill into this and then run it down, and then we'll weld it on there, and that should sturdy things up there. I mean, really, it doesn't need to be, it does need to be strong, as this is very vital for a drag racing vehicle to have an accelerator pedal, but it's not like this thing's seeing a ton of force or nothing like that. But I think once we get that brace here, we'll be good to go. So I'll get that all popped out so that way I can figure out what I'm going to do there. The brake pedal I'm going to look into further, not right now though. We're going to start actually putting the truck together even more. Now we can start kind of reassembling everything on the truck. We've kind of hit some blockades on the engine. I know what I'm doing. We're waiting on some parts, all that kind of stuff. So we can kind of start assembling everything. So when I went down to the basement, pretty much everything other than like the doors, which we're not going to probably do those tonight because they need to be washed badly, very, very badly. There's a lot of dirt on there. But all the other parts are in the basement. I went down there and it's just, there's like a whole truck down there. So we have our fuel cell we can put in. Our old air dog bracket can actually come off since the new engine has the Waterman. So we can get rid of that. We can put our shocks on, put our fuel cell in, and just kind of start working in that fashion. I'll just kind of go down and whatever parts seem to make sense, we can get them installed and just kind of keep moving like that. I guess when we run out of parts in the basement, we're done. So guys, we got a bunch accomplished tonight. Working from front to back of what we just did. Got our rear little louver things installed, these square panels. Basically, they're just there for when you close the door to let the air out. So, you know, otherwise it wouldn't want to shut all the way. I don't know what they're called. But anyway, otherwise we'd have two big gaping holes in the back of the truck. Our trans cooler is mounted back where it was. Our shocks are installed. Our fuel cell is installed where it was, but I did debate for a little while because we will have one less return with the new setup. We won't have the air dog return going right back into the tank like we did before. So I was thinking about just turning the whole thing, but I decided to just go with what we had. We can change that at a later date. Eventually we will probably drop down to a much smaller fuel cell than the 15 gallon because this truck will not be on the street again. If you guys remember, we were kind of originally going for like a street race truck vibe, but with the new solid block, that's not going to happen. Also, we got our last exhaust hanger off. I don't know why I didn't cut it out before, probably because the fuel cell was in. But we got that out, got the pins knocked out because how those are mounted, they actually go through the frame and they're welded on both sides. So we got all that out. Also, we got our old air dog mount off, got everything painted up, cleaned up, so we're looking good back here. Basically just kind of went down to the basement and said, what parts make sense to install? So we're good here. You know, our trans cooler, you know, transmission's staying in the same spot. These louver things, they need to be in there just so we don't have to fill those holes, yada, yada, yada. The shocks, we're going to keep using for now. Eventually, we will go to a different setup. Anyway, guys, we got a lot of progress done tonight. We figured out that our ECM mount that I made is going to work on the new Freedom Racing Engine's engine. So I'll throw a coat of paint on that. We'll do our final install eventually. We figured out where our accelerator pedal needs to be on the truck. That way we can adjust the brake pedal later. So I'll make a permanent mount for that. Also, we got all of this work done in the back here. Yes, it was just bolting some stuff in, but we also got some stuff ground off the frame, our air dog mount, our exhaust mount, all that. And throughout the week, you know, figured out our little trials and tribulations of ECM mount, our brake system, you know, the proportioning valve, just those little things that you don't see coming. We tackled a few of those. So anyway, I think we're ready to start making this thing look like a truck. Just with how the truck sits, Where we're at, like I said, we're waiting on some parts and all for the engine that I would like to have before we install it, because I think it'll make things a lot easier. So I'm thinking that fenders, doors, I don't know if the hood maybe, you know, we might wait until after the engine's installed, I don't know. It does give us enough clearance to get everything out, but I don't know about that right yet. But we can really start putting this thing back together until the engine is ready to go back in. Once we get to that point, the big hurdle is going to be wiring. There is not a single wire on this truck. Well, other than these two on the fuel cell, which we can just cut them off. We're never going to use them. Anyhow, wiring is going to be a big deal on this thing. There's not a lot of wires we have to run, but if you've been with the channel for a while, you know it's not my favorite thing in the world, that's for sure. So anyway, guys, that's going to do it for tonight. Get out in your garage, get the wrenching on your truck.